And even in the beginning, it's okay just to fall slightly below that medium range, so it gives people an incentive to bring you in. And then when you establish yourself, then you can bump up a little bit and have a little bit more room. But I would say just don't be greedy. I always like to tell people I'm not greedy, I'm people greedy. I read some stuff that I've written down that I know I want to do and where I want to be and maintain myself as a person. And I just try to really hold true, because you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, when we first came to you for funding, okay, that was when we started, because I was like, I need to have a basis of having something when we do get these bigger jobs. And then, it's usual to go through a slump. We went through a slump, and then, we're right there on the cusp. I went through a lot of personal tragic stuff. Like I like to say, there's strength to adversity. The biggest times of growth are coming from some of the shittiest times. And then we got those projects, and you funded us on that Empire Wind project. And then from there, we were back generating our own revenue, and we didn't need any funding. And now here we are today, getting one of our largest projects to date, where we do need the financial support so we can continue to grow and maintain this project and other projects.
Yeah, and it'll take longer, but you'll have a much more sustainable business. And I think you're like a perfect testament to that.
Yeah, and I think a good thing to think about when in a business, it's not about the short-term money grab, it's about the long-term of it. And I've never thought about the business in a short term. I'm always thinking down the road, like, where can we go? What can we do? How do we expand into things? Who's the right people that we need to work with?
Welcome to the next episode of the Construction MF'ers podcast. My name is Scott Peper. I'm the founder and CEO of Mobilization Funding. And today I'm excited to have a guest, a friend of mine, company business owner. Watched him through the grind. We met early, in the early days before he was ever even remotely a customer or anyone. And I'm going to have him talk about his journey today, from starting his business, implementing the things that are important and critical, and most importantly, tell his story. Tim Wakefield, what's up?
It's going good, Scott. It's great to finally be here.
You too. It's great. Well, we've had lots of conversations so far this morning. Maybe we'll jump into that. But you are the CEO and founder of two companies, 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝘆 Marine Services and RTI Onshore, and a formal Navy military background. You found a successful way to exit the military into business. And you've also been successful in implementing your business, and you're now 5 years in.
Yep.
Successfully and profitable and doing well. And that's a big accomplishment. As we talked about off camera, 50% of businesses fail within 2 years, or maybe even a year, and 80% fail before 5. So congrats, man.
Thank you.
You got through the big hurdle, the gauntlet. That's your SEAL team training there.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Let everybody know kind of your background, how you got into this world. Like, how did you even get into the diving world, underwater?
So originally, I went straight from high school into the Navy. I originally went into the EOD pipeline, went through dive school, ended up getting hurt and medically dropped from that, but then stayed in Navy Expeditionary Combat. And did a lot with like RIVRON and support for spec warfare, and then got into like doing combat medicine, transitioned over to that, and then when I got out of the Navy, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was like, you know what, I like dive school, I'll go become a commercial diver. So I went to commercial dive school, ate up some of my GI Bill, get a little extra money, a little time off after the military. And then I started working in the Gulf of Mexico, in India, Malaysia, working offshore oil and gas on the commercial diving side.
I love it.
And then I came back, started working heavy civil construction and salvage in the U.S., where I was on a project for 3 years. And that's where, unfortunately, one of my good friends was killed on a project, and I was the DMT, the diver medic, who treated him for 2 hours up until he was pronounced dead in the hospital. And we were promised a bunch of changes. Of course, nothing ever happened. And we're treated as an expendable commodity, not a valued asset, and it's in a very person-orientated field. There is no commercial diving without the divers. So we kind of threw caution to the wind, and for lack of better words, said fuck it. And I had $150,000 in my savings account, and there was a group of guys that were willing to come with and help me out. So it took us almost a full year to get going. Dwindled that $150,000 down to zero. If I had hair, it would have been gone at that point. But it was really just a repetitious thing of like, I knew it was going to work. I just didn't know how it was going to work. And so I started with the principles of, okay, let's set this up of how would I run this if I'm not a shitty person? And so that's how I came up with all my pricing, what's fair to pay the guys. So we pay higher than industry standard, pay higher than anybody else in the industry. We take care of the guys from the second they leave their house to the second they come back. We take care of our clients, and then also the quality of the work that we do. So those are the three areas that we strive to be the best, and we want to change the industry, is quality of life for the crews, so pay and treatment of our clients, and then quality of the work that we put out.
I love that.
So
that's awesome.
And that's really what we built the foundation on. And I always jokingly say this is I've made up everything as I've gone along, because I had no sense of what a real business is supposed to be or how I'm supposed to do something. So again, I just did it all on the principle of don't be a shitty human.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
Because honestly, a lot of those principles that they say or it's supposed to be are the things that actually, they're not what got the business there. They're where the business is now. And you think about like big corporate America, and you and I have talked about this privately, but one of the biggest things that frustrated me the most was I'm in corporate America and I'm actually doing well considering what they say as well. And yet I'm not happy. I'm like, why is that? And I'm not saying that everybody was a shitty person or they were bad people, but there were some. But the biggest thing that made me feel bad was it was incongruent to what I felt like was normal way people should be. Like, why do we have to do it this way? Why do you have to focus on these things when that's what nobody cares about? Why are we all pretending that that's the way it needs to be when no one really wants it to be that way? And so it's that private conversation everyone has, but then when you get in a boardroom or you get in a meeting, no one's having that same conversations. It's like, I love how you filtered that out. Where do you think you got that feeling from inside to say, you know what? The way to be successful in this business is to not be a shitty person, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you mentioned, like, take care of my people, take care of my customers, and do great work. Like, how did you get that? Where did that come from?
I think that stems kind of from a little bit from my childhood, how my parents raised me, and the work ethic and how to be a good person as a child and growing up through high school, and then really in the military, then I had good leaders and I had bad leaders, but I specifically remember the good ones and what they did, and I always tried to carry that with me. And I'm still good friends with those guys, specifically like a guy named Master Chief 𝗕𝘂𝘆, one of my good friends to this day, but he always made sure that we were taken care of and what we needed to do, and that's how we always got the best results. Was we took care of the guys, and then what needed to be, they took care of us. So it was a give and take. Mm-hmm. And I always viewed that as a very symbiotic relationship, because if I take care of them, they're going to make sure that we're taken care of by taking care of our clients and making sure the job's done right, making sure that they're safe, they're not doing anything sketchy, or because we're already in a very dangerous industry. We used to be in the top 5% of the world for most dangerous job. Thank God we're like outside the 10% category now. But I mean, it's still a real thing. Death is a real thing in our industry. So I would really say it's just a culmination of years of repeated. I saw what worked and what didn't work, and I knew how I didn't want to treat people, and I knew how I wanted to treat people. And I've always believed that I consider myself a servant leader. So I like to say I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I'm just the spider weaving the web of everybody together.
Yeah. So let's transition it over to business for a quick second.
Yeah.
You're now started the company, which I know you now at this point you figured out is a lot more than just going down and opening an LLC, getting some insurance, and smoking $150,000 as if it was on fire. Yeah. What do you think were the things that in starting the business you knew you needed to do, but all of a sudden there was this new list of things that had to happen that you had no awareness of? And so if someone's watching this now, like, I'm going to leave my company, and I feel the same way. I'm not a diver, but I'm an electrician, I'm a plumber, I'm an excavation, and I don't like all the same things. I want to start. What advice would you say, man, I wish I knew these other three things aside from taking care of my people, taking care of my customers, and doing awesome work?
That's a loaded question, but I would say the thing you need to know most is you need to have a good network of people. And what I mean by that is in the early days, I didn't just go to people and say, hey, I want work, I want this, I want to do that. I went and I formed, and I still do to this day, relationships before I ask people for work. Because I think a good foundation for creating lasting relationships is having a personal level where I can go. Like, I have clients that I go up and I just have lunch or I have dinner with them. And they're in astonishment because a lot of people rely on Zoom calls or Teams. Mm-hmm. But it's when people get on Zoom calls and Teams, instantly when they're on it, they lose focus because they're on their phone or they're multitasking and they're not really there. So I think people have really tried to take advantage of technology but lost the human touch. So creating those relationships that are going to last, that's because, okay, one of my good friends that we were talking about before we started, he's the CEO of 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝘆 I coincidentally worked a job for him that we didn't even know we had met each other. And granted, he's the CEO of a multinational major company, and I'm just a diver. And then I just started talking to him on LinkedIn, and then he posted a video, and I happened to be in the video, and we were standing next to each other in the video, and I sent him a message. I said, hey, I think you owe me some monetary value for my likeness in your video. And it's like that, and we created this relationship, and not that everything he was doing was applicable to me, but he taught me a lot of hard lessons that he's learned, and learning from those lessons and just having someone that's where you want to be and seeing what they're doing and listening to the things that they've done or the mistakes that they've made, that can save you a lot of headway. And then I'd say the other thing is, when you start the business, you have to constantly be learning. It's not just, oh, I know how to do this trade or do this task. It's every day I read different books. So I'm constantly reading books all the time just to learn stuff. I don't want to be the master of one thing. I would love to be the jack of all trades, have an understanding, but that's why I have my people. They're the masters of specific things, and I can go to them. But if I can have a broad understanding of what we're doing in whole, then I can go into rooms and have a smart conversation. And I never consider myself the smartest person. Yeah. I'm always willing to learn, but I think forming those relationships goes a long way, and more so than people think.
I think you're 100% correct about that, especially the learning aspect. One of the things we didn't talk about is you and I have known each other. Gosh, was it 2019 maybe? Yeah. It was when you started, right? It was before COVID, and we talked, and you were about to head out to this little tiny obscure island out in the Indian Ocean. If I remember correctly, I wrote down here, 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝘆, right? Which is a joint forces base that's way out in the middle of nowhere, and you had your first contract, and you were going to do stuff out there, which whatever, and you're going to do your thing, what you can't talk about. And as you're out there and you're going out there, there was a lot of things you had no idea, but you're like, you know what, I got to be there because I'm going to learn a ton. I remember you telling me that I'm going to learn like a lot about this. I can't just not go. And you went out there thinking you might be there and come back and forth twice, but you were there for 4 months, start to finish, with your team.
Yep.
And you had said something earlier too that's very applicable and resonates with me. And you said just a minute ago, I was going to start, I had $150,000. I know I was going to be successful. I just didn't know how I was. And like, that is really the entire juice of starting a business. Having that belief and that faith that you don't know how it's going to happen, but you're going to learn, you're going to educate, and you have the premise of 3 really great values, your people, your customers, and doing awesome work. If you do those things and have the right mentality and continue to learn, you're right. You will be successful. It might not be on your timeline, it might be on someone else's timeline or another timeline, but it is definitely going to be successful. Where do you think that part got instilled to you, that confidence? Because you didn't have a business before. You didn't come from a family who created 75 businesses you watched start. You were in the military. You dove. You were a diver. You worked on the sites. You're diving. Like, there's nothing about any of your previous experience that would tell you you're going to be successful in business and have confidence in doing it. So where do you think that came from?
I think it came from the fact of, I'd like to say I'm very stubborn and I'm too stupid to quit. So once I see what I want to do, that's what I go after. And when I started this, I never gave myself an out. There is no plan B. Like, it's either this or nothing. That's it. And in like that first year, it was a struggle. I mean, every day I would wake up, I'd go for runs, and I would just sit there and self-talk, like, I don't know how this is going to work, but it's going to work. And sometimes I would go for really long runs. Like one time I just left my house and didn't plan for it, but I ran 33 miles. And it was just all me talking to myself, thinking about what I'm going to do, trying to plan for the future. It's still the same thing I do now. I do that constantly. I wake up and I think about what I'm going to do. I read some stuff that I've written down that I know I want to do and where I want to be and maintain myself as a person. And I just try to really hold true, because you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, when we first came to you for funding, okay, that was when we started, because I was like, I need to have a basis of having something when we do get these bigger jobs. And then, it's usual to go through a slump. We went through a slump. And then, we're right there on the cusp. I went through a lot of personal, tragic stuff. Like I like to say, there's strength through adversity. The biggest times of growth are coming from some of the shittiest times. And then we got those projects, and you funded us on that Empire Wind project.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we were back generating our own revenue, and we didn't need any funding. And now here we are today, getting one of our largest projects to date, where we do need the financial support so we can continue to grow and maintain this project and other projects.
Yeah, and you're six, almost 7 times the size than you were when we first met.
Yeah.
And realistically on your way to be and 3 times larger than you were even 3 years into business, in the last 2 years. So you're on a tremendous growth path. You've a lot of your people are all the same people that you started with, and you've only added to that. And those are great sentiments around being successful. One of the things I want to ask you now that people struggle with, regardless in our network, is bidding. Okay, and like if you can master it in the government sector, you could probably offer some good solid tidbits to others. And not everything you bid is hard bid. Not everything you bid is sole source. It's very competitive, despite the fact that there's not a lot of people out there diving. You might think there's a lot of people diving.
There is.
There's a lot of people diving. Yeah. And it's a very competitive space, but you're finding success at not only as a new business, but a new contractor, a new government contractor, and you're finding your way through business. What do you do? What is your approach to bidding to keep your core basic principles in place, but also win?
So I think, again, going back to the relationship thing, is having the conversations with the contractors. If you're coming in as a sub, go to the prime, have the conversations, be like, hey, what are some things you've had in the past that have been downfalls of subcontractors, of why you're not happy with those relationships, and what can we do to make sure that we exceed those expectations? I think that's big, because it could be as simple as transparency, being radically transparent. We're very transparent. Some of our competitors turn in 1-2-page bids. We turn in 14-page bid. And the reason being is I list every single thing out. Like, if they need a breakdown, I don't care. I'll give them estimated timelines and what problems that we could likely encounter on X, Y, Z. It's just that transparent, the willingness to give the information and say, hey, we're going to stand in the ditches with you. But I think as a new business, you need to stay as lean as possible. I mean, we're still lean, and I've just hired on, like a CFO firm. But that's something where I pay an annual fee, and then they review my books. I'm not paying a full-time. It's like barely a part-time salary as that, but it gives me everything and the support I need. And then, I have my lawyers. It's having that infrastructure. But so keep your office small for as long as you can. If you can do it on your own, but obviously you need to scale, so you can't always do it all by yourself, which is what we're going through, and we're growing. So keeping that small. So look at what your real cost is, what your labor burden is, and your equipment cost. And then, put your insurance, and just try not to be greedy with the amount that you put on your insurance. And then look at, if you can see what the market is going, try to take a look and see where you fall. I wouldn't say you want to be the lowest, but you don't want to be the highest. You want to kind of fall in that medium range. And even in the beginning, it's okay just to fall slightly below that medium range, so it gives people an incentive to bring you in. And then when you establish yourself, then you can bump up a little bit and have a little bit more room. But I would say just don't be greedy. I always like to tell people I'm not greedy. I'm people greedy. I want to keep my guys employed and keep everybody around me in one place.
And you know what's funny? As someone who looks at lots of government contract bids and margins that people are at, you're very much in a normal range, but you also have figured out how to do well and make money in that range, where I see a lot of people that might even have a higher margin than you actually aren't making money as a business, and they're trying to figure out how to charge even more, or they're trying to still figure out, they haven't realized that yet, and they're trying to undercut themselves even more and trying to save their way. And it's that unique balance, I think, that you've started with and founded that really keeps it successful, because there's nothing worse than working on a project and not making money. Going back to the bidding process, your transparency and the way you put that together, someone might say, well, how do you have time for that? It's such a waste of time, because why would you do that if you only need 3 pages? What would your answer to that be?
I can safely say we've never hit our clients with change orders unless they've added work to our scope. And I think it has a lot to do with our transparency, where we fight against a lot of people who they bid very low and then they hit them with hundreds of thousands of dollars in change orders, which is a very shitty tactic in my opinion, because then it's harder for us. But we've done a lot of fighting where now we're bringing on those bigger clients because they're sick of people doing that to them.
That's if they even get paid.
Exactly.
I mean, just because you put a change order in doesn't mean you're getting paid.
Exactly.
I've seen more businesses go down on a project because they think they're getting paid on a change order, and they don't, or it doesn't get approved, or it turns into an argument.
Yeah. Our philosophy is, let's go in, knock it out of the park, make everybody look good, and get more work because of it. And that's, again, the transparency is you're building a relationship.
Yeah. And that's the servant attitude.
Yeah.
Like, it's for them and for your team.
Yeah.
And then you'll get it last. And you know what? The rewards that come back from that are so much more significant. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I love that you did that, because I have a belief, particularly in construction, and I've said it a million times about bidding on so many different cameras I can't even imagine. But I've said, I wish someone would just say, here's my bid. It's going to take more work. You probably have to bid a lot more. You really will. But over a 3 or 4 year period of time, after you actually execute on that work and perform, that is the key. You can't just put a great bid together, be detailed, but you have to actually go perform, which that's the premise of how you build your business. Great people, great performance. Okay. That done. That said, I really think taking a bid sheet and laying it out so clearly, like, here's the flaws in the way you've asked for this bid. These are things that could happen. These are things and how we'd handle them if they do happen. This is what the cost could be if it happened. And you really teach and educate someone through that bid. By the way, here's how much money I may even make on this. And I want to bid. Even if you got so transparent where you're like, I'm going to bid, or I'm going to invoice every month this portion of how much I'm going to make, but it was so transparent, a total price there, there's going to be people that'll try to knock you down on that, but those are going to be the people you don't want to work with.
Exactly. The
ones that you want to work with will shine and be like, okay, cool, this is a fair price overall. Boom. They won't focus on how much you're making, they'll focus on the actual value for price, and I just think a transparent environment to that will highlight the best of the best people that you want to work for, and you'll find each other quickly, and it'll take longer, but you'll have a much more sustainable business. And I think you're like a perfect testament to that.
Yeah, and I think a good thing to think about when in a business, it's not about the short-term money grab, it's about the long-term of it. And I've never thought about the business in a short term. Like, I'm always thinking down the road, like, where can we go? What can we do? How do we expand into things? Who's the right people that we need to work with? And it is building those relationships. Now, we've walked away from clients, and, there's projects that I'm owed a lot of money on. But I would rather take that loss and work with the people that we want to work with than be held at the throat with a knife and have to work for crappy people.
Yeah. And figuring those people out is an easy way to do when it's a transparent process, because your transparency is going to show their transparency, and you're going to learn what you want to know.
Well, exactly. And I mean, a good thing too, go back to the relationship building, is I always like to tell everybody, we have a lot of relationships with engineering firms and stuff like that. Or even the estimating departments will call me and be like, hey, Tim, what do you think about this? Or can you give us your thoughts? And like, what's the timelines and stuff on this? And that's how we've developed. But I always like to jokingly say, which I'm being serious, is anything under 2 weeks, I'll consult for free, which kills consultants, because they're like, oh, why would you do that? But again, I'm building my currency as long-term, not, oh, I need money for my time right now. I'm saying, hey, your time is valuable, my time is valuable, but I'm going to give you my time to help you out to make sure we're all successful.
Yeah.
Because I want you to win that project, and I want us to be on that project. Yeah,
it's not transactional. You're really looking out for the benefit of them. And maybe they don't give it back to you, but they'll, again, I believe this, and I've talked about the law of reciprocity doesn't work necessarily one-to-one. You may help somebody, and someone else may help you, and you need that, and that's how it works.
Exactly.
And giving that also feels good. I mean, you're educating, you're helping, and it may come back 2-3 years later, or maybe 2 months later. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So you mentioned learning and educating yourself. I do think that's really important. Are there any specific people? There's so much information out there now. People try to figure out, how do I decipher it? But are there any specific related to business, like podcasts, learning, like leadership, books that you would recommend? Maybe there's 2 books, 3 books, or here's the people I consistently listen to, because I think a lot of people are going to resonate with what you're saying. I mean, you're a normal guy, you've been successful, you're finding your way through. Like, if I was watching this, I would say, man, I wonder what he listens to.
Right. Not a very traditional school person. I will be the first to say that. But when I started my business, I started my bachelor's in construction management at LSU, and I finished that within 3 years. Did I learn a lot? No, because I had already done all the applicable stuff in the field and learned it. So I wouldn't say, but it gives me a little more validity going to a table. But I would say, again, back to the reading, Ray Dalio, Life and Work Principles, was a really, really good book. Very smart. It's kind of like on financial investing, but he lays out how he made one of the, I think he was one of the most successful hedge funds ever, and it's a great book, and it just lays out a lot of good life and work principles to live by. There's, what is it? A good book that's not necessarily business related, The Alchemist, and it's kind of,
a great book.
It is a great book, and I feel like every time I read it, I learn something different. But I think it speaks a lot about the willingness to keep going on despite not knowing what's going to happen, and learning what your purpose is. I think that's huge. And then, I listen to, okay, I amp myself up, David Goggins, Jocko, and Jordan Peterson, and, Andy Fratelli, we were talking, yeah. So it's, I listen to those, and, the odd thing about me is when I go work out, I don't listen to music. I just go put on a YouTube that has, sound bites of these guys talking.
I do too. It's so funny. Never listen to music, ever. It's always a podcast or something like that. But, I think that gets your brain working. That gets the free thinking going. Like you mentioned, running 33 miles around an island, right? Or wherever you were when you did that. Yeah. That triggers my brain more than music does. I know there's certain types of music that when you listen to, they can do the same thing. But those thoughts get me programmed, and sometimes I zone out. I don't even remember what they're talking about, but my
Yeah.
brain is moving, and I'm thinking through the things that are applicable to my life. Like, it gets me in the right space.
Well, exactly, and it goes to the subconscious thought, honestly, is the more you listen to people having that positive talk and saying, push past your limits and do this and do that, the more it's going to be ingrained in you, and the more you talk to yourself and say it. I'm a very big believer in when you say things out loud, that's what your brain is recognizing and, ingraining into your computer. And the more you say it, the more you believe it. That's why that self-talk is so good, and that's how I've always pushed and driven myself, is because I can self-motivate myself that way. And so
what's next for 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝘆 and RTI?
So I would say, we just got into some new spaces as we've been growing, like I've been telling you. So we just hired on a back office person to support and help me and a little bit with the estimating, and we're in the process. I have a very strong candidate for my head of business development.
Nice.
Hopefully, maybe in the next 2 weeks, I'll have a nice big announcement. That person's one I've been working on for quite a while. So I'm hopeful on that, and that'd be a huge step. So we just brought on a full-time maritime archaeologist. So we're now doing missions with DPAA, which is Defense Personnel Acquisition Agency. So we're helping recover and identify lost sailors, soldiers, and airmen from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all the conflicts. So that's nice. It's giving back to the community.
That's awesome.
And that's really cool. And then with that, we're getting into like remotely operated vehicles and autonomous underwater vehicles to help with like the surveying. We actually have a really good joint partnership with University of Chicago, Illinois. So that's who we were just in the Philippines with for a month, looking for the wreckage of a second Lieutenant Ives. And, we found a good debris field. We'll go back. But then we also have in some works of doing some even bigger projects in the Philippines. So it's very exciting, and we really love our partnership with them and Henry J. Ford Foundation and DPAA with the and then so getting into that type of work. And I would say my goals, and I don't know when it will happen, would be ultimately I want us to be the gold standard and the best dive company in the United States. And in those 3 categories I told you, quality of life for the crews, treatment of our clients, and quality of work. And I think we're on a great trajectory to do that. And we already have such a big buzz, and guys that aren't working with us are calling us all the time and want to work with us. And now they're going to their employers and saying, why is this company treating their guys so well and we're being treated like this? And
That's
our
awesome.
clients are now people are coming to us with work, which is nice.
Yeah, and you paid your dues.
Well, I still pay my dues every
Yeah,
single
you still
day.
do, but you know what? You people want that sometimes. They think, man, I've worked my butt off for this year. I've worked my butt off for 2 years. You're in for 5 years, and people are now calling you. It's like, but like I always like to tell people, I don't know, which is the same thing I told myself. Look, man, I used to run down the street, or I'd be working out, and I'd say, look, you're not retiring anytime soon, so really, what does it matter? You got time. You got time. You got time. You got time. The truth is, you don't have a lot of time, and you have to work with urgency. But on the flip side, when you're thinking about getting across the line, it's going to take longer than you think it's going to, and you have to be aggressive every day, but also be very patient with letting time work. It's part of the equation, as one of my great mentors likes to say all the time. It's Andy Frisella said to me, look, time is part of the equation. Aggressive patience is the key. Be aggressive every day. Be expeditious in the things and urgent that you can every day. Yeah. But you have to know that time is part of the equation, and you just can't rush the amount of time it's going to take. But it'll take a hell of a lot longer if you're not urgent every day.
Well, exactly. And then I think the aspect is to always continue. I like to say I'm always climbing for the top of the mountain, but when I get to the top of that mountain, I'm climbing for the top of the next mountain, and I'll stop when I take my last breath.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is great. All right, transitioning to what I like to call like rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to ask you the question. You tell me you tell me what your first thought comes to your head.
Okay.
All right. And I'm throwing a new one on here. What's the coolest or craziest thing you've found underwater?
The coolest or craziest thing I found underwater? I would say the project we did in Peru. where they uncovered a frigate that was built in 1847, perfectly intact. They were expanding 𝗕𝘃𝘀𝘆. We went down to do the initial diving and survey and recovery of it. So that was probably one of the coolest things that I've ever gotten to do, and it was for my company, which is even better. But yeah, it was the first steam-powered frigate built for Peru called the 𝗕𝘃𝘀𝘆. They even have a model of it in their Naval Heritage Museum, and we got to go see that, and we were diving on it. It's like things were identical. We were finding 9-inch cannonballs, like all the rigging and tackle, and like the hull was copper sheathed, perfectly intact, and like the craftsmanship of everything and how true like these beams and everything. It was crazy. It was such
how big? And a frigate's a boat, right?
Yes.
How big is that boat?
Oh shit! I think that one was like just under 200 foot long.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they pull it up?
No, they protected it to keep it as like a history monument.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. I wasn't expecting you to tell me that. I was thinking something else. What's the best advice you've ever received on a dive site?
You should always be learning. There's never a point in your career where you shouldn't be learning something, because the moment you stop learning is the moment you should get out of the industry, because you're not safe.
Yeah. Speaking of safe, what's your go-to safety tip for newbies?
I don't think I can say it on here, but
you can.
Okay. Don't stick your hands anywhere you wouldn't stick your dick. Well, and the reason being is we work in conditions where a lot of the time, I would say over 90% of the time, we can't see what we're doing. So you have to have a very good mechanical mindset. So like we go look at blueprints and stuff. So you're working in zero visibility. And remember, the water is always moving. If you're in a river, there's a current. And if you're in the ocean, there's swell. So things are going like this. Now, if we're doing like clamps and stuff, you got to think things are like moving, flexing. So if you put your hand somewhere where something's flexing, and there's videos of it online, you can Google this, like commercial diver incidents, Gulf of Mexico, getting degloved, like ripping all your skin off, tearing your hand, or it's just
from the current alone,
just from stuff moving because of the current and the swell. So that's always a good one. Just you have to be very mindful of where you're placing your body and your appendages, because you may think it's okay, but you need to make sure that it really is okay.
And like you said, it's not like you have maximum visibility all the time.
No, most of the time it's like close your eyes, and that's what our work is like.
And squint. All right, pick one. 3 different jobs. You have salvage, maritime archaeology, or just plain old good old-fashioned waterfront construction?
Definitely salvage. Salvage is a lot of fun. It's something different every single time, and the guys love it, and everybody gets paid well, and it's just a cool job to say that you were a part of.
That's cool. And what's the most underrated skill you think in the industry?
The ability to learn and listen, or let's call it take criticism too.
I like it.
That's because with the younger generation, it's been a very big struggle to find good people, because our industry is notoriously rough for being rough on people, but it's because they're rough on them because your life is dependent upon that person when we're working somewhere. So they want to make sure you can handle the pressure.
Yeah, I think if people need to know it's okay not to know, which means it's okay to learn, which means it's okay to listen and ask questions and not be. And then you need to be in an environment, which I know you've created, where you're not criticized for asking a question, even if it's what you think is a dumb question. Like if you need to know that question, you need to know it before we go underwater, or before we go on a job site. Like, just ask. Now, if you ask the same question 7 weeks in a row, okay, maybe that's a dumb question, but not the first time, second time, or probably even the third. Like, make sure, it's good. Tell people how can they find you? How can they keep up with you, whether it's through your social media, your company? If someone says, man, I want to work with this guy, or I want to hire this guy, I want to hire his company, how do they do that?
So if you go onto our website at www.DCS, so Delta Charlie Sierra Marine Services with an S at the end .com, There's a link to our Instagram, our LinkedIn, our Facebook. We have a full-time social media and website guy. He takes care of everything. He's based in Houston. He does all of our videos and photography. He does a really good job. So if you want updates, that's the best way. And then there's contact. There's a number on there. If you call that, you can get put in touch with me. And I will gladly talk to anybody who has any questions or even just wants to know a little bit more.
Sweet. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been awesome. I appreciate you sharing your story. I've loved watching you grow to the business you are, individual. To me, it's been awesome because, candidly, I've been on a similar journey the last 5-6 years too. So it's been cool to kind of do it together.
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, other than one loan for a very short brief period of time that we thought you needed and you thought you needed, that quickly got just different terms to your credit.
Yeah.
You know, we've just kept up. We haven't even really worked all the way through a whole project yet together. So I'm excited for that too. But I just appreciate your candor, man, the way you handle yourself, your company, what you stand for. It's exactly what I want to be and want to work for too. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me, and thanks for great friendship over the last 5 years and always being there in the what if factor, or even if we just need some documentation for a bid, like you guys have been there and really helped out. It's nice to have you guys in our back pocket, so I'm not worried about taking on these big projects.
Well, you're welcome and kind. It's our pleasure, but thank you. Well, folks, if you found any value in this, which I'm pretty sure you have, particularly go and listen to the bidding aspect if you do nothing else other than enjoy some of the conversation. But listen to the bidding. Listen to how Tim and his company have won project after project in a very tough space. Implement that. And most importantly, give us the support. You can find both of us on LinkedIn, our websites, YouTube. Share any of this information that you can with people you think it'll help. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best. God luck.